We were driving down the highway on a gloomy, overcast day, the air heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and echoes of a recent rain. The engine of our old Ford purred like an elderly cat, while dreary landscapes flickered past the windows like an endless ribbon of memories. My friends John, Michael, and I had just enrolled in a university in the neighboring state. This was our first major journey, and although we were all a bit nervous, the car was filled with a calm silence, broken only by the rustle of tires on the asphalt and occasional sighs. John was driving, and I sat next to him, staring at the endless road ahead. Michael was sprawled in the back seat, his eyes half closed, but I knew he was listening to every word we said. "We're almost there," John finally said, breaking the silence. I snapped out of my thoughts and looked at my friend. He was tall, with broad shoulders and sharp facial features. His blonde hair was always slightly tousled, as if the wind never left him alone. We were heading to a house that John had inherited from his grandmother. He must have been thinking about her because I noticed him gripping the steering wheel tighter. My grandmother started acting strange in the last years before she died. John unexpectedly began to recount, his eyes fixed on the road, but his voice tinged with uncertainty and sadness. After my grandfather passed away, she lived alone and rarely left the house. Dad wanted to hire a caregiver for her, but she refused, saying it was better for her to be alone, to not endanger others. We didn't understand what she meant. Soon she began saying that someone was watching her. We took her to the hospital, but tests showed that her mind was fine. So why did she see these visions? Over time, she stopped talking about it, and we thought she was getting better. He paused, took a deep breath, and continued. 6 months ago, she was found hanged in the kitchen. Everyone said she had gone mad, but I remember her differently, kind and caring. She was a teacher at the local school and always helped those in need. It's sad how it all ended. I wish I could go back and talk to her about her worries. Michael, who had been sitting in the back, leaned forward, intrigued by the story. He was slightly shorter than John, with dark hair and always a bit of stubble, giving him a scruffy look. I looked at my friend, trying to comprehend what he had gone through. John didn't like to talk about his grandmother, but today seemed to be a special occasion. His voice trembled as he said, "Maybe I'll be able to understand what happened to her when we get there." But then he laughed, breaking the grim silence. "Sorry, guys, for getting all gloomy on you," he said, shaking his head. "After all, we're heading to a new place and going to live on our own. That's pretty cool, isn't it?" His laugh sounded a bit nervous, but it helped lighten the mood. I smiled too, but my thoughts weren't as cheerful. Was it wise for us to stay where John had such bad memories? I was also a bit uneasy about staying in a house where someone had died, but free housing was a significant factor. Soon, we entered a typical mid-sized American town with a population of about 50,000. The streets were paved with old asphalt, and cozy houses with well-kept lawns and white fences lined the sides. We drove past the town center, where there were small shops, diners, and an old movie theater with a neon sign. People strolled leisurely along the sidewalks, enjoying the cool evening. After driving a few more blocks, we found ourselves in a quieter neighborhood, where the houses were farther apart, surrounded by dense gardens and old trees. Finally, John turned onto a narrow gravel road, leading to our new home. It was a 2-story house with a simple yet elegant design. The walls were painted light gray, and the roof was covered with dark shingles, a small garden with flower beds struggling for survival among the weeds spread around the house. The facade featured large windows, framed in white, through which the evening sun's light streamed in. A veranda stretched along the front of the house, supported by slightly weathered but still sturdy wooden columns. On the veranda were two old rocking chairs, seemingly waiting for their owners to share stories of bygone times. We approached the massive front door, and John pulled a key from his pocket. He hesitated for a moment, as if gathering his courage, before inserting the key into the lock. The door creaked open with a long, mournful groan as we stepped inside. The house smelled of dust and old wooden floors that had long been neglected. The first thing we saw was a spacious hallway with a high ceiling. In the center hung an antique chandelier covered in cobwebs. On either side of the hall were doors leading to other rooms. Along the walls were portraits, which I guessed were John's relatives. We began to explore the house, driven by curiosity and a hint of excitement. Turning left, we found ourselves in a cozy living room with a fireplace and shelves filled with old books. Dusty curtains were half drawn, letting in weak evening light, giving the room a mysterious atmosphere. In the corner stood an old piano, its lid covered with a layer of dust. Moving further, we turned right and discovered a spacious, bright kitchen in dire need of renovation. The stove and refrigerator looked old but functional. Along one wall was a large wooden table surrounded by several chairs. Climbing the creaky stairs to the second floor, we found 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. Each bedroom was modestly but comfortably furnished. We began unloading our belongings from the car and carrying them into the house. I took my bag to my room and started unpacking. Pulling the cover off the bed, I found the mattress still in good condition. I carefully arranged my books on the shelf and hung my clothes in the closet. Michael set up his computer on the desk, connecting cables and laying out his books and notebooks. John, meanwhile, started unpacking his things and dusting off the furniture. When we finished unpacking and settling into our rooms, fatigue began to take its toll. John suggested, "Hey guys, how about we have a beer and relax? We deserve it." Michael and I gladly agreed. We went down to the kitchen and opened the fridge, where John found a couple of bottles of beer. We sat at the large wooden table, which now looked much better after we cleaned it and put our things on the shelves. "To new beginnings," John said, raising his bottle. Michael and I clinked our bottles with his and took a sip of beer, enjoying the moment of silence and tranquility. The light of the evening sun streamed through the windows, painting the room in warm tones. The next day, we got up early, full of energy and determination to get the house in order. We divided up the tasks. Michael took the kitchen and living room, John the bedrooms and bathroom, and I took the hall and staircase. When we finished the main cleaning, John said, "Guys, I found the entrance to the attic, but I couldn't find the key. We should look through the cabinets, maybe it's lying around somewhere." We agreed it was an important task, but decided to leave it for later. We had a couple of days left before classes started, and we continued setting up the house. We bought the necessary groceries, dishes, and cleaning supplies to make our stay more comfortable. We also checked the internet connection and set up our computers. Finally, classes began, and our lives gradually fell into a routine. We were enrolled in different faculties. John studied engineering, Michael went for humanities, and I chose computer technology. There were no problems at home, and we quickly adapted to the new routine. However, I noticed something strange. There were no mirrors or even the slightest reflective objects in the house. The spoons and dishes were either plastic or non-glossy. This seemed odd and a bit unsettling, but I didn't give it much thought. A week went by, and one night when I came home from school, it was already late. Exhaustion hit me, and I decided to take a shower and go straight to bed. That night was unusually stuffy. The air felt thick and heavy, pressing on my chest. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, trying to find a comfortable position, but it was hard to breathe. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the attic. At first I thought I imagined it, but the sound repeated, clear and insistent. These were light but distinct steps, as if someone was slowly walking in the attic. My heart started to beat faster and I couldn't sleep. Gathering my courage, I got out of bed and went to check what was happening. Climbing the creaky stairs, I saw a lock hanging on the attic door. This seemed strange to me. If the lock was in place, who or what could have been making those sounds? I stood there for a few minutes, listening to the silence. The footsteps had stopped, and the house was quiet again. I thought perhaps I had just imagined it, and returned to my room. However, the feeling of unease didn't leave me. I tried to calm myself, convincing myself that it was just my imagination, brought on by exhaustion and the stuffy air. Returning to bed, I couldn't sleep for a long time, listening to every rustle. Finally, worn out by anxiety and trying to explain the strange sounds, I fell into a restless sleep. But deep down, I had a sense that something was wrong in the house, something we had yet to uncover. The next day, I didn't tell the guys about the previous night, afraid of seeming strange. I never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural, and my nature was always to seek rational explanations. So I decided to find out what had happened the night before. Perhaps a raccoon had gotten into the attic or something similar. Going outside, I walked around the house, inspecting it from all sides and trying to see the roof, but I saw nothing unusual. Then I asked the guys if they had found the attic keys. They shook their heads, and I decided to drop the subject. Another week passed without anything unusual happening, but one day when I came back from school, I found John in the kitchen. He was sitting at the table, staring into space, looking like his soul was somewhere far away. His face was pale, his eyes wide open and full of horror. He didn't react to my arrival, as if he were in a trance. "John, what's wrong?" I asked, approaching him. He didn't answer. I looked at the table and saw a spoon I had recently bought lying next to him. In its dull reflection, I didn't notice anything strange, but something about the scene sent a chill down my spine. John suddenly shuddered as if waking from a nightmare. His eyes slowly focused on me, but they still held a trace of mad terror. Did you see it?" he croaked, his voice hoarse and broken. "See what?" I asked, feeling my anxiety grow. "In the reflection," John whispered, his voice trembling. "There was something creepy. It was staring at me from that damn spoon." His hands were shaking, and I noticed beads of sweat forming on his forehead. John looked like he had spent the night in a nightmare from which he couldn't wake. His hair was disheveled, and his shirt was wrinkled, as if he hadn't slept all night and had spent it tossing and turning. I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing with thoughts of what it could be, but no rational explanation came to mind. "Maybe you need to rest," I suggested, trying to speak in a soothing tone. John nodded, but his eyes were still full of fear. He slowly got up, and I helped him to his room. When he lay down, I returned to the kitchen to take another look at the spoon. In its dull reflection, I again saw nothing strange, but the feeling of unease didn't leave me. When Michael came back, I told him what had happened with John, and we went to check on him. John was sleeping in his bedroom, but his sleep was restless. He was covered in sweat, tossing and turning, repeating, "No, no, no." Then he screamed and started breathing rapidly. We rushed to him, asking what was wrong, but he looked at us with terrified eyes and didn't respond. We helped him up and guided him to the kitchen, where we poured him some water. John looked at the glass warily, but trembling, he took it and drank it all in one gulp. "Come on, buddy, tell us what happened," I said, looking him in the eyes. John sighed and, dropping his shoulders wearily, said, "If I tell you, you probably won't believe me. Just tell us, I insisted. John sat up straighter as if preparing for an important speech and began to speak. I came back from school and decided to do some cleaning, John started, his voice quiet but tense. While cleaning the closet, I found an old box of keys. Among them was one that looked unusual. I immediately thought of the attic and decided to check if this key would fit. John paused, as if gathering his thoughts, then continued. I went up to the attic and tried the key in the lock. It fit. When I opened the door, it was dark and dusty inside. I took a flashlight and started inspecting the space. In the corner, I saw an old chest. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. John fell silent again, his gaze growing more troubled. I approached the chest and opened it. Inside were old books, photographs, and a mirror, a small oval mirror with a carved frame. I picked it up, and when I looked at the reflection, I saw not only my face. There was something else, a dark figure with glowing eyes. He froze, his eyes widening in horror, as if reliving the moment. That figure, it was staring right at me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I dropped the mirror and ran out of the attic, locking the door behind me. But the worst part is that now I see that creature in every reflection, John finished, looking at us with fearful eyes, expecting us not to believe him. And indeed I didn't. I thought he had started to lose his mind, and to my shame, I remembered his grandmother. Could it be hereditary? Michael tried to calm our friend, saying everything was okay, and asked if John wanted to go to the hospital, but John shook his head. I knew you wouldn't believe me. Then Michael said, "Okay, you said the mirror is in the attic. We'll go and take a look." John grabbed his hand. "Are you crazy? I wouldn't wish this on anyone, especially you guys. Don't go up there." But Michael pulled away and said, "Don't worry. I don't think there's anything there." I nodded in agreement, and we decided to go up to the attic. We climbed the creaky stairs, each step sounding like a sinister warning. John followed behind, pleading with us not to do this, but his words went unheeded. The stairs led to an old door that John had forgotten to close. The attic was dark and dusty, filled with the smell of old things and abandonment. We turned on our flashlights and began to explore the room. In the corner stood the old chest. We approached it, and Michael opened the lid. Inside were old books, photographs, and a mirror. A small oval mirror with a carved frame. It lay among other items, looking innocent but ominous. I picked up the mirror and Michael and I looked into it. At first nothing happened besides our reflections, but then bloody numbers began to appear on the surface. First 663. Then it quickly disappeared and 664 appeared. We nearly dropped the mirror in surprise. Suddenly we heard heavy breathing and a wheezing sound echoing through the attic. We turned around but saw nothing. The sound seemed unreal, as if it was coming from the mirror itself. We looked back at the mirror, and what we saw made our hearts stop. A terrifying figure appeared in the reflection, a werewolf. Its eyes glowed red, and long claws and sharp teeth were visible even in the dim light. It was staring directly at us, and its breathing grew louder and louder. The mirror trembled in my hands, and I could barely hold on to it. "Quick, get out!" John screamed, his voice filled with panic. We threw the mirror back into the chest and bolted for the exit. My heart pounded like crazy. I was gripped by panic, a cold chill running down my spine and my legs trembling. We dashed into the kitchen without stopping, as if the embodiment of horror itself was chasing us. In the kitchen we stopped, breathing heavily. We looked at each other, trying to grasp what had just happened. "Is this a dream?" Michael exhaled, his face deathly pale. "What's going on?" I felt my body shaking from fear and adrenaline. I tried to calm down and grabbed a glass of water, gulping it down, hoping it would help. But when I set the glass down on the table, my gaze fell on the blade of a knife lying nearby. In the reflection of the blade, I saw an eye. It was staring right at me, unblinking, full of malicious and cunning watchfulness. I froze, feeling cold sweat running down my back. At that moment, I heard someone's breath in my ear, heavy and sinister. I screamed and jumped back, feeling fear paralyze my body. "No, no, no," I mumbled, unable to look away from the knife. "Did you see that? In the reflection?" Michael and John looked at me with concern and fear, trying to understand what was happening. John, even paler than before, stepped towards me. "What did you see?" he asked, his voice trembling. "An eye. There was an eye," I breathed, pointing at the knife. It was watching me, and I heard breathing. We stood there in horror, not knowing what to do next. John sank to his knees, clutching his head in his hands, repeating, "I told you not to go up there. Don't go up there." Michael took a step back, his face white. "What do we do now?" he asked, looking at me with desperation. I didn't know what to say. My mind was blank, and the only thing I felt was the cold fear gripping my entire body. Your grandmother must have seen this creature too," I realized, looking at John. We looked at each other in fright, understanding that she had ultimately found no way out and ended her life. We sat in silence for a long time, trying to gather ourselves. Then Michael said, "Let's sleep. Maybe everything will be better tomorrow." We nodded and went to our rooms, but I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning in bed, listening to every rustle. Only in the morning did sleep finally take me. I woke up around noon, realizing I had already missed my morning classes. Sleepy and irritable, I went to wash up in the bathroom. Thank God, there was still no mirror there. We hadn't had a chance to buy one yet. Then I went to the kitchen and saw Michael standing by the table. He was looking at the knife's blade, as if deciding whether to look into the reflection. "Michael, what are you doing?" I asked as I entered the kitchen. He flinched and turned to me. "I want to check if it's gone." We exchanged anxious glances and slowly approached the table. Fearfully, we both looked into the reflection of the knife. But there was only our reflection. No shadow, no eye, no terrible creature. "Nothing," Michael whispered, his voice full of relief. "Yes, nothing," I confirmed, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. We called John, and he came running, his face still pale and tense. "Look, John," Michael said, pointing at the knife. John looked into the reflection and saw nothing either. The three of us stood there, realizing that the horror of the past night might have just been a nightmare. Relief filled the kitchen, and we started to laugh from the nervous tension. "Maybe it really was just a nightmare," John said, smiling weakly. We hugged each other, feeling more confident. It seemed that it had all been a dream, and now, seeing nothing scary, life was returning to normal. We quickly gathered for school, discussing our plans for the day and trying not to think about the previous night. Although a deep-seated anxiety remained, we decided not to dwell on it. Arriving at the university and seeing so many people, my tension began to ease. We walked towards the campus, trying to immerse ourselves in the usual student life. But for some reason, I instinctively avoided looking at the mirrors we passed. I was afraid of seeing that creature again. After a few classes, we decided to grab a bite and headed to the university cafeteria. Entering, we took our food and sat down at a table. The spoons were crystal clear and polished, reflecting the light and surroundings. When I picked up the spoon and was about to eat, suddenly, in the reflection, I saw an eye. It was staring right at me, full of malice and hatred. I was so scared that I dropped the spoon on the floor. My friends turned to me, their faces full of concern. Michael, noticing my reaction, cautiously looked at his spoon. He didn't drop it, but slowly lowered it, his face turning pale. "You see it too?" he whispered, his voice trembling. John jumped up and ran to the counter, returning with plastic spoons. "Here," he said, handing them to us. But our appetites were gone, and we decided to head back home. As we walked through the lobby, we noticed a large mirror hanging on the wall. It drew our attention, and we couldn't help but look at it. In the reflection, we saw our figures, but behind us, hunched and moving slowly, was that same creature. Its eyes glowed red, its long claws and distorted face visible even in the dim light of the lobby. It moved like a shadow following us. In the reflection, we could see its heavy breathing and hear its wheezing. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests, fear gripping us. I felt cold sweat trickle down my back. "What do we do?" Michael whispered, his voice barely audible. "Don't look," John said, his voice trembling, but he tried to stay calm. "Just don't look in mirrors." We turned away from the mirror and quickly headed for the exit, feeling the creature in the reflection still following us. We returned home, trying not to look at our reflections in the glass doors and windows. Gathering in the kitchen, we tried to figure out how to solve this problem. Fear and anxiety hung in the air. "We need to go and smash the mirror," Michael suggested, his voice resolute. I hesitated. "If that was possible, your grandmother would have done it already. But we can try." We decided to test his suggestion. Grabbing a hammer from the closet, we headed up to the attic. The stairs creaked under our feet, and the air grew heavier. Opening the attic door, we entered, and I saw the old chest with the mirror again. "Ready?" John asked, his hands trembling as he held the hammer. I nodded, and Michael stepped back, giving John space to swing. John raised the hammer and struck the mirror with all his might. The sound of the blow echoed through the attic, but the mirror remained intact. Not even a scratch, as if it was protected by an invisible barrier. John struck again and again, but each blow was useless. With each hit, the creature in the mirror seemed to grow angrier. Its eyes glowed brighter, and its face twisted with rage. It seemed the blows only fueled its fury. We went downstairs, feeling helpless. "So, that doesn't work," Michael said, his voice full of disappointment. "What do we do now?" "Maybe just don't look in mirrors?" John suggested. But even he realized it was a foolish idea. On one hand, if you think about it, this creature has only been watching us and hasn't harmed us directly. But every time I see it, an instinctive fear awakens in me. And it's not a pleasant feeling. And the feeling of constantly being watched isn't great either. We fell silent, realizing our situation had become even more complicated. We needed to find another way to deal with this creature, understand its nature, and perhaps find a way to banish it forever. But for now, we didn't know what to do, and fear followed us everywhere like a shadow. We sat together and decided that tomorrow we would start looking for ways to solve our problem. It was something mystical, and we needed to seek answers from such specialists. That evening we went to bed. I was sleepy and exhausted since I hadn't slept well the night before. When I lay down on the bed, I immediately fell asleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up from the stuffiness. The air in the room was heavy and thick, as if someone had closed all the windows and doors. I heard footsteps in the attic. These steps were quiet but distinct, as if someone was cautiously moving across the old, creaky boards. I got up and went into the hallway, where I met the guys. It seemed they had also woken up from the strange sounds. We exchanged worried glances and decided to go check the attic. The stairs creaked under our feet, each step resonating in our hearts like a warning. We opened the attic door and entered, illuminating the way with flashlights. Shadows danced on the walls, creating the illusion of movement. But despite our fears, there was no one there. The attic was empty, only old things, and the chest with the mirror. As we were about to leave, I caught something strange out of the corner of my eye. In the corner of the attic stood a man. It was a firefighter in an old, charred uniform. He was slowly walking around the attic, setting everything on fire. The flames quickly spread, and I felt the heat as if I was in a real fire. "Hey!" I shouted, but the firefighter didn't respond. He continued his work, and the fire spread faster, filling the space around us. Suddenly, I felt someone touch my shoulder. I turned and saw John. His touch seemed to bring me back to reality, and the vision disappeared. The attic was dark and quiet again, with no traces of fire. "What did you see?" Michael asked, his voice shaking with fear. I took a deep breath and told the guys about the firefighter and the fire. They were scared, realizing the house continued to show us its horrors. We decided not to go back to sleep and wait for morning, continuing to look for answers. Sitting at our computers, we sifted through hundreds of pages on the internet, but found nothing similar to our situation. None of us could offer a rational explanation for what was happening. Then we decided to seek answers from spiritualists, mediums, and the church. It made no sense to go to scientists, as everything that was happening defied all logical arguments. When dawn came, we quickly gathered and left the house. Our first stop was the nearest church. Upon entering, we immediately felt a change in atmosphere. The calm and silence characteristic of a sacred place offered some comfort. We found the priest and told him about our experiences. The priest listened attentively, but his face expressed doubt. "I can pray for your home and you, but I fear it may not help." He sprinkled us with holy water and gave each of us a small cross. As we were heading out, I accidentally glanced at the large mirror on the church hall wall. In the reflection, among the parishioners, I saw it. The same creature. It stood behind us, its eyes burning with malice. I froze in place, my heart beating faster. John and Michael saw it too, and the three of us bolted from the church, feeling fear grip us. Then we went to a medium whose address we found online. The medium's house was old and covered by thick trees. Inside, we were greeted by a middle-aged woman with a serious and focused expression. She invited us into her séance room, where a round table covered with a black cloth stood, and candles burned. The medium listened to our story, then closed her eyes and began to move her hands slowly over the table. "I feel a dark presence," she said, "but I cannot banish it from here. You need to seek help from stronger specialists." We thanked her and left, feeling even more dejected. All day we searched for other mediums and spiritualists, but most of them seemed like charlatans. Some offered expensive cleansing rituals, others gave advice that sounded absurd and ridiculous. We returned home, exhausted and disappointed, not knowing what to do next. This time we decided to sleep in the living room, trying to ignore the sounds that might disturb us. We placed all 3 mattresses on the floor and tried to make ourselves as comfortable as possible. Despite our fear and anxiety, we slowly drifted off to sleep. In the morning, someone rang the doorbell. We woke up, still groggy, and went to answer it. A woman in her 40s, dressed in ordinary travel clothes, stood at the door. She wore large glasses and had a slightly anxious expression on her face. "Hello? Does Mrs. Grayson live here?" she asked, looking around at us. We exchanged surprised glances and said, "Mrs. Grayson died 6 months ago. Did you know her?" The woman was visibly shocked. "She died? My God. I didn't know. I've been abroad all this time." We invited her in and she showed us a letter. "I found this letter only yesterday and came here right away," she said, handing us the envelope. We read the letter, and inside it talked about the mirror and the creature. There were details that no one but us could know. The letter warned of the evil contained in the mirror and the need to find a way to banish it. "What do you know about this?" John asked, looking at the woman. "My name is Emily," the woman began, adjusting her large glasses. "I've been studying paranormal phenomena for a long time. In my youth, I came across a story about a mirror that brought death to others. This story started in ancient Rome and stretched through the centuries, leaving a trail of destruction and tragedy. Eventually, this trail led me here, to the USA." We listened to her, holding our breath, as Emily continued. "The mirror we're talking about has a very ancient and grim history. It was first mentioned in the Chronicles of Ancient Rome, where it was believed to belong to a priest who used it for necromancy rituals. They say the mirror was created using dark magic, and the souls of fallen warriors who were trapped in its glass. After the fall of Rome, the mirror disappeared for several centuries, but it resurfaced in the Middle Ages. In the 13th century in England, it ended up in the hands of an alchemist who tried to use it to achieve immortality. Instead, the mirror brought him madness and death. The alchemist perished in a fire that destroyed his laboratory, but the mirror remained unscathed. Over the following centuries, the mirror passed from hand to hand, each new owner suffering from terrible visions and horrific misfortunes. In 18th century France, it belonged to an aristocrat who went insane and killed his entire family before taking his own life. In the 19th century, the mirror ended up in Russia, where it caused mass hysteria in an aristocratic family. At the beginning of the 20th century, the mirror disappeared for several decades, but in the 1950s it reappeared, this time in the USA. Over the last few decades, the mirror has moved around constantly, leaving a trail of destruction and tragedy. Eventually, it ended up with your grandmother, Mrs. Grayson. Emily looked at us with a serious expression. "I don't know exactly what the nature of this mirror is," she said, "but I would like to see it myself. Maybe then I can understand more." We tried to dissuade her. "It's too dangerous," John began, but she insisted. "If I don't see the mirror myself, I can't help you," she said firmly. We exchanged worried glances, but eventually agreed. We took her to the attic. The stairs creaked under our feet, and the air grew heavier as we ascended. When we got there, I opened the chest and pulled out the mirror. Emily watched it closely, trying not to show her fear. When she looked at it, the number 665 appeared on its surface first. Emily frowned, her face growing pale. In the next second, the creature appeared in the mirror, a monster with glowing eyes and a distorted face, its claws visible even in the dim attic light. Emily screamed and stumbled back, dropping the mirror. We caught her to keep her from falling. "This is horrifying," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Now I understand what we're dealing with." We went back downstairs and Emily looked distressed. She sat in a chair holding her head. "This is worse than I thought," she said. "The number 665 puzzled me. I'm afraid that if we see the number 666, it could mean something much more sinister." "What does 666 mean?" Michael asked, his voice filled with anxiety. 666 is the number of the beast mentioned in the Bible, in the book of Revelation. Emily explained. It's associated with the Antichrist and demonic forces. If this number appears in the mirror, it could mean that the evil contained within it has reached its full power. This could lead to catastrophic consequences not only for you, but for everyone around. We listened to this with shocked faces. Suddenly, Emily pulled out a mirror from her bag, and when she looked at its surface, her face instantly turned pale. The monster appeared in the mirror, the same terrifying image with glowing eyes and a distorted face. She barely held onto the mirror, her hands shaking with fear. Emily quickly put the mirror back in her bag, her breathing unsteady. "What do we do?" John asked, his voice tense with stress. Emily just shook her head, panic and worry in her eyes. "I'll try to figure out how to deal with this," she said, standing up. "For now, stay here and under no circumstances show the mirror to anyone else. It could be very dangerous." We watched as she left the house, her steps quick and determined. We felt helpless, left in a house full of secrets and horrors, not knowing what to do next. Emily promised to return with answers, and we could only hope that she would find a way to deal with this evil. Time passed slowly, and the fear of the unknown gripped us again, leaving a sense that the worst was yet to come. Emily was gone for a couple of days. We held on, though at night we heard various frightening sounds, footsteps, rustling, quiet knocks. These sounds heightened our tension and fear, but we tried not to panic. On the third evening, she returned. We saw her from the window and hurried to open the door. Emily looked exhausted, her eyes shadowed, and her face pale. She entered the house, barely able to stand. "Water, I need some water," she said, and we hurried to get her a glass. She drank it greedily, and setting the empty glass aside, took a deep breath. "It's hard not to look at reflections," she began. "Mirrors are everywhere, and that creature was constantly watching me. But I found out about a ritual. I don't know if it will help us, but we must try." We listened intently, realizing this might be our only chance. "We need to prepare. Take the mirror. We're going to the garden," Emily said. We quickly grabbed the cursed object, careful not to look at it. Then we went out to the garden, where there was enough space for the ritual. "This ritual is from Christian culture," Emily began to explain. "We need to create a protective circle, sanctify it, and recite exorcism prayers. We'll use holy water, candles, and crosses to banish the evil contained in the mirror." She started pulling these items from her bag, and we began setting the candles in a circle. Emily placed the mirror in the center, surrounding it with crosses. We lit the candles, and their faint light began to illuminate the dark garden. Emily took the holy water and sprinkled the circle, reciting prayers in Latin. We joined her, holding the crosses and repeating the words of the prayer. "O Lord, protect us from the evil contained in this mirror," Emily intoned. "Banish the darkness that threatens our souls and grant us light and peace." We continued praying, and it seemed that the darkness around us began to thicken. Suddenly, sounds emanated from the mirror, wheezing, heavy breathing, and malevolent whispers. The mirror started to tremble as if resisting our ritual. "Don't stop!" Emily shouted. Suddenly a voice interrupted us. "Hey, what are you doing here?" We turned and saw a police officer approaching us from the darkness. He looked curiously at our strange ceremony. "We're performing a cleansing ritual," Emily began to explain, her voice trembling but firm. The officer frowned and came closer, examining the candles, crosses, and the mirror lying in the center of the circle. "What's with the mirror?" he asked, leaning in for a closer look. At that moment, I noticed the surface of the mirror starting to turn red. The officer continued to look, his face turning pale when the number 666 appeared on the mirror. His eyes widened in horror. Suddenly the air was filled with a deafening roar, coming not from the mirror but from somewhere nearby. We turned and saw a dark figure rising from the pool water, which was not far away. The water didn't ripple, as if the creature was emerging not from it but from its reflection. The figure became more distinct, and we saw something horrifying. It was a creature with long, clawed limbs covered in black fur. Its eyes glowed red like embers, and its teeth were sharp as daggers. "Run!" Emily screamed, her voice shaking with fear. The officer, trembling with terror, pulled out his gun and began shooting at the creature, calling for backup on his radio. The bullet struck the creature, but it didn't react, continuing to advance toward us with the same malevolent determination. "It's useless!" I shouted, grabbing the officer's arm and pulling him back. "We need to run!" We dashed away, stumbling and barely staying on our feet. The creature continued to close in, its roar thundering in our ears, making our hearts pound with fear. The officer ran with us, continuously calling for backup. We didn't look back, feeling the creature's breath on our necks. We ran toward the road, hoping to find help or shelter. The creature pursued us, its massive clawed paws pounding the ground with a menacing rhythm. Its eyes burned with hatred, and it seemed to be targeting us as if we were marked. "Faster!" Michael shouted, glancing back and seeing the creature closing in. I noticed it could move through mirrors and reflective surfaces. As we passed a broken window, its silhouette flickered in the shards, and moments later it reappeared behind us, closing the distance. The creature seemed to glide through any reflections, approaching faster and faster. The officer running beside us was in shock. "What the hell is this thing?" he shouted, but none of us could answer. Our hearts raced, our breath was ragged. We burst onto the road and saw headlights in the distance. "There!" I shouted, pointing to the approaching car. But the creature was too close. Its roar grew louder, and suddenly it vanished, only to reappear in the reflection of the side mirror of the passing car. The vehicle swerved, the driver lost control, and the car crashed into a tree with a loud crack. We kept running, barely keeping our footing. The creature didn't relent, its roar growing louder and more menacing. We ran, not looking back, but I knew it was getting closer. I turned to Emily and shouted, "This thing won't leave us. Any ideas?" Emily held her head, trying to concentrate. Then her eyes widened and she shouted, "We need to try smashing the mirror while the creature isn't around." We decided to split up. John, Emily, and I ran back toward the house, hoping the creature wouldn't follow us. We sprinted down the street, our hearts pounding with fear and adrenaline. It seemed the creature had stayed behind, chasing the others. But as we approached the house, terror gripped me. The creature was perched on the roof, its eyes glowing red, and it seemed to know our plan. It looked down at us, its claws exposed, ready to attack. My heart froze at the sight. "Quick! To the garden!" Emily shouted, and we ran toward the garden where the mirror lay at the ritual site. We almost reached the mirror when the creature suddenly leaped from the roof. It flew at us with incredible speed, its claws aimed directly at us. I thought it was the end when, suddenly, ghostly figures appeared out of nowhere. These spirits held the monster back, their glowing forms surrounding it, holding it in place. John gasped, "Grandma, I see her among them." I saw her too. John's grandmother's figure was among the spirits. They held the creature, giving us precious seconds. "Quick!" Emily shouted, and I grabbed the mirror, placing it on the ground. John raised the hammer, his hands shaking with tension. Gathering all his strength, John struck the mirror with all his might. It cracked, and in the next moment shattered into thousands of pieces. At that instant, the creature let out a deafening roar, its body beginning to dissolve into the air. The spirits vanished too, their mission seemingly complete. We stood, gasping for breath, among the shards of the mirror. Silence enveloped the garden, and we realized the nightmare was finally over. Emily sank to her knees, her face expressing relief. Soon, the police arrived at our house, and we explained everything that had happened, though no one believed us, except for the officer who had witnessed it. The house finally became quiet and peaceful. We cleaned up the remnants of the ritual in the garden and tried to return our lives to normal. However, the memories of what had happened remained with us. I noticed that each of us started avoiding mirrors. Even simple reflections in windows or utensils made us tense. I was afraid to look in the mirror, fearing to see something sinister. We all became a bit paranoid, checking every corner of the house for reflective surfaces and carefully avoiding them.